Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Bing. I'm facilitating this Coastal Corridors Monitoring Committee. So I want to welcome you all. Thank you for coming. We do expect a few more people to be here, but you never know. People sometimes things pop up. Regardless, before I kind of do a more formal welcome, I want to introduce Austin Gray, who's our project manager. And with every DelDOT sponsored meeting, there's always a safety briefing, and so we're going to do that right off the bat.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, everybody. Austin Gray, with DelDOT Planning, Assistant Director of Planning, and also Project Manager for this Coastal Corridors Monitoring Committee effort that we're kicking off tonight. A lot of you are familiar with this effort. It's been ongoing for a few years, and we're now kicking it off again with a revamped group and kind of a new path forward for the study. So we do start every presentation off with our mission statement, which is to provide excellence in transportation for every trip, every minute, every dollar, and every one. These are a lot of the guiding principles that we follow in all the decisions that we do. And then we also like to show the biggest traffic fatality slides for numbers. So this just shows that you breakdown of all fatalities that have happened so far. Obviously, we're early into the year, so we're at 4. We were at 6 this time last year. We ended 2024 with 130 fatalities compared to 137 the year before. So we're seeing a decrease, but a lot of what we saw last year was an increase in pedestrian fatalities, motorcycle fatalities. Those are usually our most vulnerable road users. And so we're always looking for ways to all the numbers down. Special focus on this more vulnerable groups. We're at 4 for the year right now, and I'm sure we'll talk more about with this group. You'll see these numbers whenever we meet, so this will be a thing that you all get used to seeing. And
Yeah.
Yes.
Director, I'm going to come.
Okay.
So if you do the next slide. So just a quick housekeeping before I introduce Pam. So this is set up as a virtual meeting. However, our goal and our hope is that we're not planning on meeting that often. I'm going to get to that, but that we do want you here in person. We fear these meetings work better when people are in the same room, can engage with each other, can really take part in the meeting. Not to say if there's some conflict that you have, we'd much rather have you on virtually than not have you on at all. But we would like to see you here. But if you're joining us, if you're a member of the public, I know we have one member here, Tom. Hello. But these meetings are designed for the monitoring committee. So if you're a member of the public and you come here, or if you join through hybrid, we are going to focus our attention on the group. We will allow some time at the end for public comments. So if I'm not taking your question online, or if it's not that I'm being rude, we're just going to follow kind of our ground rules and wait till the end of the meeting for that. And again, we will do public comment at the end. And now what I'm going to do is just review the agenda and then invite Pam to kind of give us a welcome. So we are going to do introductions, go around the room, make sure everyone knows who's here. I will go over the community kind of purpose, roles, and expectations. I just sort of teased that out a little bit, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that. We will talk about background and prior studies, current studies that are and initiatives and metrics. We do have a spotlight topic on land use and transportation integration tools. We'll talk about next steps, and again, as I mentioned, the public comment. I think for this meeting, there's a lot of information we're going to share with you. We do want your questions, any comments, but we're going to try to create a baseline of information so that kind of everyone here has the same amount of information. So before I go to that committee purpose, roles, and expectations, I did want to introduce Pam Steinbach. She's the Director of Planning for DelDOT, just to kind of formally welcome you all and kind of give us our marketing words here. So Pam had to be on by virtually today. Maybe we'll see her face pop up, but Pam, can you hear us?
I'm here. My picture's here. Yes, I have my camera on, but yes. So thank you, Andrew. And my apologies, I could not be in person today, but you were in very good hands with Andrew and Austin and the whole team. So I just wanted to just have a big shout out. One, thank you all for attending. I can maybe if I put my reading glasses on, I can see you more, but thanks so much for attending. This is a very hot area, in the part of the Sioux State. We had a huge effort with the first kind of like phase 1 type of thing. We did a lot of analysis. We had all of your great, all of the input from the members. Very, very good, use of time. We came up with a fair amount of short, medium, and long-term, initiatives, and we are just very we want you to know that we didn't just want to do that that big effort and then be done. Like, this monitoring really is to kind of keep the pulse of what's going on in the coastal corridors area, but most importantly, it's about getting your grassroots, feet on the ground, input from your community members, your neighbors. So it really is, sorry, my cuckoo clock, but it really is just, we're so thankful for your active engagement, and we look forward to a long partnership with this team. So I'll turn it back to Andrew, but thanks so much. And next time I'm sure I will be there in person. Thanks again, but I'll be online the whole time.
Well, thanks, Pam. So go to the next slide. And again, when we get into the background, I think we're gonna, I already signed it. Just grab anywhere at the table. And you haven't even missed introductions yet, so
Thank you.
We're there. Go back one slide if you don't mind. Awesome. So the project kind of team that you see more around the side of the room is made up of DelDOT, obviously, Office of State Planning Coordination. Dorothy's in the back representing the Office of State Planning Coordination, Sussex County Planning and Zoning. Michael's here representing them, as well as you see a variety of our consultant team members who you'll also hear from tonight. So, that's our project team, and we're really excited to kind of get going with this. As Pam said, this is kind of the next phase, and it really is an important phase to kind of keep these things on the front burner, not on the back burner. So now we'll go to there. Sorry to make you go back and forth. So what I do want to, this is everyone. Again, I do expect maybe a few more people to show up, but why don't we go around the room, just the members at the table, introduce yourself, who you work for or representing, and if there's anything else you want to share with us about your kind of interest in these types of issues.
I'm Dave Burkholder. I'm with Greenwood Mennonite School.
Hi, I'm Trey Cherry Wall with DART DTC.
I'm Angie Burton. I'm on the board of the Nature Conservancy, and I was also on the first study that went through with this.
Hi, I'm Holly Wingate, Sussex County Planning and Zoning Commissioner.
I am Kayla Atkins. I'm the town manager for Allendale.
Dean DeWarnick, town manager for the town of Georgetown, sitting in for community development director, who will be at the next meeting.
Hi, everybody. Scott Thomas with Southern Delaware Tourism.
Hello, Sean Tidwell. I am the transportation supervisor for the Indian River School District.
Kevin Yingling, Delaware Electric Cooperative.
Of Sussex County Economic Development.
And you can see on the slide, we have copies of this, but you can kind of see who else is a part of this committee. We have some emergency services. All the 5 towns are represented on this committee. It is a committee. Everyone's a stakeholder, whether you're the town manager or a fire chief or economic development. You're still a stakeholder and a citizen of this county. But this group is going to tend to go a little bit to more institutional or governmental. It doesn't have a ton of community members. We're kind of at a level where we're trying to really reach you all and work with you in the issues that you're facing and seeing, kind of merge that with what we have. We absolutely will have a role for the public. The public is always invited to these meetings. We'll have public workshops. We never do anything without our friends in the public being a part of this and giving their input. So let's just go on now to kind of some, yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
There are several members, I believe, online too.
Great.
So
Pull that up.
Janet,
Yes, Janet Todd, I see, yeah. And then I think Randy is, yeah, councilwoman for the town of. I'll leave it at that. Does anyone know? Milton. Okay, great. There we go. All right, thanks. And I know George Cardwell, who's representing Milton on this committee, was out of country traveling when we scheduled this. He was apologetic that he couldn't be here, so. Okay, so in terms of our purpose, and you can read this. We'll probably go over this each meeting a little bit. For this meeting, I'm gonna kind of spend a little time on each bullet. But in terms of our purpose and role, we want to review and understand state and local roles, processes, and procedures. Exchange updates on transportation land use conditions, including statuses of recommendations from previous phases of the project. So that's what Pam kind of focused on. There was a prior iteration of this where a lot of recommendations came out of that. So we're going to kind of spend some time on that and make sure that there's a familiarity with that, because what we're looking for is for, you all to help lead in a way, kind of say, maybe we should push this forward, or maybe this should be a priority, or have you thought of this? Like, let's get some momentum going. DelDOT is investing a lot of time and effort. Let's see it turn into actual, projects and things like that. Advocate for the advancement of recommendations. That's what I was just saying. Support communication with the broader community. I mean, that's an important role. I mean, in each of your roles, you have constituents and contacts, and you're in places where you're going to be around a lot of people. You may hear from them and say, why isn't such and such doing this? Or why, we want to expand the knowledge base and put you in a position that you can help, if not maybe answer everything, but at least be in a way that you can have a good, intelligent conversation with people about some of the things that are out there. And then, of course, just forward them to us if you have issues. We're happy to talk. In terms of schedule, we're not looking for it to be a big burden on you all. And part of the reason why we'll probably bug you and try to get you to come to these meetings, because we're planning on meeting 2 times a year. We may have an occasional other meeting if we just feel like there's a need for that, maybe virtual. We will communicate with you through newsletter, electronic updates. And as I mentioned, we do plan on having a public workshop. One of the things in terms of, the purpose and role, advocating that third bullet, we're about to start the next DelDOT CTP cycle where, DelDOT is going to be out looking for meeting with the public and kind of looking for ideas of what should be in the next 6-year CTP. This group is kind of primed in a perfect position to kind of take some of these recommendations, and it could be things that weren't recommended. We're not stuck on just whatever's in the 4 corners of those recommendations. Something else could develop that wasn't pressing back when we came up with that report and so forth. So, but at any rate, we're looking for this group to be in a position to try to put forth some ideas for CTP projects that you all, see fit. So we'll go to the next slide. These are kind of our action statements. We don't want it to be a passive committee. Like I said, it's not like we're meeting every week or every month, but we do want you to share information and promote communication between decision makers and community stakeholders, share technical information and data. We're going to provide a lot of data and a lot of technical information to you. Provide input on local transportation issues and priorities, input on the prioritization. And we can't do everything. So how do we figure out what should maybe rise to the top? And help to facilitate solutions to transportation issues as they arise. So, this is a little bit of like, mom and apple pie here. I mean, we're not breaking any news with these things, but this is what we're going to really try to look to you to help do. So any questions on just kind of the starting point of this process? Anything you heard that made you uncomfortable, surprised, excited, anything? we get going. Okay. So.
I'm excited to hear you say, let's put it into action.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's ultimately, some of you are familiar with the 5 points transportation study, which is kind of focused on 5 points. That's been going on for a while. It came about because leaders got to a point where they said, we've got to do something. Whatever may have happened in the past that didn't allow stuff to happen, we need to bring everyone to the table. And, that effort has led to a lot of those recommendations being completed, a lot of investment happening in that general area. We're looking for, the same is the wrong word, but we're looking for this effort to lead to some tangible results, not just talking and saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if, but, really trying to get somewhere. So, but it's a slow process. We spent some time last night talking at the 5 points that, it's 2025. We started that in 2018, but there's still things that aren't done. Then you look at everything that is done that we were able to accomplish, and it's pretty noticeable. It's important. So, but with that, as Leah's about to talk, we recognize we're going to give you a lot of information here. So I'm going to try to keep things moving, but I don't want that to stop you from raising your hand, asking a question. If we get too many questions, I might say, hey, we got to slow it down. We got to get through some of this information, but hopefully we'll find that right balance. And as you're signing in, introduce yourself for the group.
Brian Reynolds, nice to see you guys
Brian,
again.
good to see you.
From Milton Fire Department.
Great. And just grab any seat at the table. You just missed introduction, so. And Brian did sit on the first iteration of coastal corridors. Introduce Leah Cassanda. Leah is going to talk about background and prior studies.
So I know I see some familiar faces out here. I see some folks I've not interacted with as much. I work with Whitman Reckart and Associates. We're part of the consulting team. You'll hear from a number of my colleagues as well this evening. I did manage the coastal corridor study process. So those of you who are on that committee recognize me. As we grow and kind of get into the implementation and the different pieces of this, we have more staff involved because, again, reflective of DelDOT's commitment to kind of carrying these things over the line and keeping things moving. So I'm going to spend a little time today talking about the transportation planning process in general, just to kind of level set. I know all of you interact with DelDOT in different ways and maybe have different backgrounds. So just want to give a little bit of an overview on that and kind of how we got to where we are today and this point in the coastal corridors study process. So with that, we have a handy little flow chart here that really highlights what it takes at DelDOT to get a project from an idea to a construction on the ground. So this is really focusing in on what Andrew referred to as the CTP process, the Capital Transportation Program. So these are not ongoing maintenance and operations. This is actually big shovel in the ground projects that have to be planned pretty far ahead of time because they cost a significant amount of money, take a lot of resources to get off the ground. So in other parts of the state, Newcastle and Kent, there are organizations that are called Metropolitan Planning Organizations, MPOs. You may have heard of MAPCO or Dover Kent MPO. And in those counties, those MPOs serve to kind of take inventory of all the projects that need to be done in the transportation space. And they maintain a list, usually called a regional transportation plan, a long-term transportation plan, metropolitan transportation plan. And those are kind of the official projects, and they feed that to DelDOT and work with that. Now in Sussex, only a tiny part of the county is in an MPO, which means that DelDOT Planning, Division of Planning, Austin here, Pam on the line, are much more actively engaged in planning for transportation here in Sussex and do a lot more interacting directly with our municipalities and with you all. So that's part of why we're doing this, because there's kind of a gap there in how this all works. So you'll see here in the PowerPoint, things kind of progress from that idea. And we'll talk a little bit more about this into candidates for the Capital Transportation Program. There's a prioritization process that goes through that with that, actually doing studies as necessary, and then kind of graduating if it's a good idea and everything works out with that study into the actual Capital Transportation Program. And then we get to building, right? So some of you know, I always call on Andrew because he was involved with the 113 study. What year did the 113 North-South study start?
Scott was involved.
Scott.
I think some of us were, that was early 2000s.
2003.
started, and now we're starting to see.
And now we have construction, shovels on the ground, okay?
So
So
that's, not to scare you, not everything takes
I'm scaring everyone.
that long, but the point is you gotta, try to get out to the best you can in front of things, because there is a process that you just can't, this isn't Disney World where you can buy a speed pass to get to the front of the line. I mean, it just takes a little while to get things done.
And obviously those 113 projects are really big projects, right? Not everything is that big or that intense. Things can happen faster, right? But just to kind of paint the picture, it is important to participate in the planning process. It does yield results. It just takes time. And being diligent. Also, this is capital projects. As I said, there's other pieces of this. So we also look to all of you to kind of be our eyes and ears on the ground, right? You're out there, you see where there's an issue on a road or a problem. And I do encourage you with those kind of day-to-day operation issues on DelDOT site, you can kind of report a problem. You can call the TMC, we'll get you that email, and there's, I think, even a number you can text. So there's all that information. So also Austin is a resource to you. If you have a question and want to talk to someone and don't know who at DelDOT is the appropriate contact, we can be that conduit as well. So this is not for everything. And also the other big piece of this puzzle that we're not going to spend too much time on today is coordinating with private development, right? So that's a whole other thing. I know many of you working at the local level are very involved with that process. That's kind of moving as well. And we do like for those developments to consider kind of all the great ideas we've come up with through this process so far. So moving on. So I'm going to spend a little more time on transportation studies, because even within the types of studies we do, there's some variety. So these, in this context, are managed by the Division of Planning. Again, other parts of the state, we have MPOs managing. For our purposes, we're talking about managed by DelDOT. All of these studies involve what we're doing right now, active coordination with stakeholders. And not only you all as stakeholders, but also members of the general public. So we will have workshops. We will have opportunities for the public to get involved, to participate. And also partners. We have the county in the room. We have Dorothy from Office of State Planning Coordination. We have a representative. But this is always part of it, and the door is open. So if you have folks who are not conspicuously absent, please let us know if you think someone else should be with us here today. There's kind of three broad categories we like to highlight. Safety and sufficiency studies are usually a smaller, shorter duration study. They're really aimed at looking at a road and ensuring, if it's not up to current DelDOT standards, looking at what it would need to get it up to that standard. So it's not a widening or a bigger road or a big new alignment or anything like that. It's kind of like getting a road up to snuff. So that is a safety and sufficiency assessment. Area-wide studies, there's a couple types. One is what we talked about, the sub-regional planning studies. That's what this is. That's what 5 points is. It's kind of looking at an area and coordinating across that space. We also have corridor studies. So recommendations coming out of this effort were take a deeper dive, look at Route 16, especially through Milton. Take a deeper look at 9. That's focused on an individual road. And we also have what are called our community transportation plans. So I know we have Randy Meredith online from Milton. Right now, we're working in Milton to do an active transportation plan in collaboration with the town. We're working up in Dover to do a freight plan. We recently wrapped up a study in Lewis last year. So kind of more municipal focused efforts. And lastly, I did want to mention what's called a PEL, a Planning and Environmental Linkages Study. So that is really that precursor to the big projects. Big projects have big impacts on the environment. Often you have to go through, especially if something's going to be federally funded eventually, this PEL process, understand environmental impacts, understand impacts on historic resources and all of that. So kind of assessing what ideas you all have and what bucket they're going to fall into and what we need to do next is a big part of what we will be doing here. And also, you all have your Bibles too, right? That's often your comprehensive plan. So we, in formulating these recommendations and working with you all on the broad, the matrix you see in front of you of ideas, we also read through all these documents and made sure to integrate what the outreach you've done with your communities and what you want to see in your communities is consistent with these transportation recommendations. So again, we're trying to do better at integrating good land use planning and transportation planning, which involves collaborating with DelDOT on all these things. So there may be things we missed, or maybe new priorities in your communities that when you do your next comp plan update, you want to address that we could help with kind of making sure we're integrating our plans too. So please, as land use concerns come up that relate to transportation, feel free to bring those up. So now, back to coastal corridors, which is why we're all here. This effort actually started all the way back in 2019. So we have been at it a while. We've started that timeline. That clock is already moving. So we've done a lot of really great work. And that's when really the effort was, Maryland said they were looking at the Bay Bridge and possibly adding another span. And Delaware said, okay, well, what do we need to do if we have more traffic coming over from Maryland? So our initial study area was looking all the way east-west, even inclusive of Maryland traffic data, and understanding where those cars were going to go. So our initial study area, you'll see outlined in purple here, focusing on Route 16, 404, and 9, east-west, making those east-west connections across the county. After we did that initial data analysis, we saw a couple trends emerging that caused us to kind of break out last year and focus on Greenwood and Bridgeville. They both got separate transportation plans, as well as what we continue to refer to in that green area as the coastal corridor study area. We're broadening back again. So you see here, we went on our separate tracks. Now we're back together to implementation. So again, this body will be talking about improvements throughout that area outlined in purple. We just kind of had to focus in on some specific communities there for a little bit. So now we've finalized all 3 of those planning documents, 2 of those planning documents, and are moving to implementation. So I'm going to return to that flow chart. So the areas we really see y'all getting involved in this process are up front here, collecting ideas and requests for studies. So these matrices, as Andrew said, we have ideas in here and things we're advancing, but there may be new things we don't know about. There may be ideas you have, concerns you have in your communities that have come up since last year. So we are still all ears if you have ideas for studies. Right now, the department's working on a portal that'll be an official way for y'all to submit, but right now you can send Austin an email, which is very easy. So if you have ideas for a transportation study that you'd like to pursue, please send them to our team. The other piece is actually doing the studies themselves. As I said earlier, we like that. The more inputs and the more feedback we get, the better the output. And lastly, what projects are going into the CTP itself? So that is happening. Essentially, that process is getting kicked off now. Sussex County puts forward a list of project ideas to DelDOT every year, and that will be ongoing through the spring here. And we can get you more details on that and how to participate in that process as it moves forward as well. So, I already started talking about this. And this is back on our study ideas. So we're going to be, through this group, sharing updates with y'all. Andrew touched on a lot of this. We want to be in regular communication. We only may meet twice a year, but obviously we all are very familiar with the email. We're going to keep kind of an active update on the status of all of our recommendations coming out of this, potentially add new needs as necessary, and also prioritize and advocate. We can't do everything all at once. I'd like to fix everything that's wrong with my house right now, but I have to plan it out and do it over the next 10 to 20 years. So we got to do the same thing here. And kind of when do these study ideas happen? We'd really like to get those ideas now. Now is when DelDOT is planning for their next fiscal year. So we do encourage you, think quick, get us your ideas now as we move into February so that we can be considering them moving into the next, planning for the next fiscal year.
I mean, if you run transportation for a school district, you may see the world very differently and see some issues that you want to address. If you're with EMS, you see it from that point of your world. Tourism, everyone has their sort of niche. We're all, if you live in the area and see everything, but you also want to focus. So you bring a certain expertise and a perspective that we can't necessarily always know about. And so, that's kind of that proactive step we're looking from you to kind of identify, that our buses get into an issue here, or our fire trucks can't get around here, or do this, or I'm just making things up on the fly. But those are the kind of things we want to hear about.
Last slide for me before I turn it over to my colleague Andrea. You have in front of you a hard copy of all the recommendations coming out of this corridor study. It is organized by recommendation type. You will note some of the status fields have red text. Hopefully anyone's colorblind. I shouldn't have used red, but y'all let me know. Anyway, that red text is things that have changed since we last met. So you'll note not every recommendation has an update, but the ones that do have some new text for you to review. And we're going to continue to do that moving forward. So those of you who have participated in the 5 points process know every month, every meeting we have, we kind of update you on salient points and things that have advanced and moved forward. So that will be the same thing we do with this. All of these materials, for those of you who are not on the committee or members of the public online, this will all be, if it's not already, posted on the project website. It is already up. So you have digital copies of these at your disposal, or if you have constituents you want to take this information back to, it will be there. And again, if you have any questions, we're available to answer them. But I'm going to turn it over to Andrea now.
Actually, before you do that, any questions or any comments? I feel like I may have scared you to not ask questions earlier on, which is not my goal.
Then I talked about
I
113.
would love for someone to break the ice here and ask a question or make a comment, but no pressure. Yeah, Kayla.
So I think it would be more my comment with what she's about to talk about in the sections. Just some things going on in Ellendale that you guys should probably have a heads up on, pretty much. On here, the comments about when you get into the town of Ellendale, the main with on-street parking, we do have some of those, so that is noted. But we also have a big property that was just annexed in, that is on the corner of 16 and 113 behind Roll Farms. That is going to be partly residential and partly commercial.
That's still known as the Enclave at Starwood, or has the name changed?
I think the name changed.
The name changed, it's Cedar or something.
It's Cedar Creek.
Creek, yeah, something like that. Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, so they've already started. The annexation was approved. It was sent into Sussex County, all the documents. But that will definitely be a big thing for you guys. Heads up for traffic reasons with a commercial and such like that, that property is coming. So.
Yeah. This is Pam, just a quick update on that. We sent the draft TIS to the engineer of record for that. But we are in also there as part of the 113 north south, there is a proposed grade separated intersection there. The NEPA, had already been approved when that big, effort was underway. So we are in talks with the developer and to try to just work through those nuances. So we may be reaching out to the town at some point to just chat on that, but just want to make it aware. Thank you so much for bringing it up, and it is on our radar.
Oh, you're welcome. Just want to make sure there's a lot going on.
Yeah, thank you.
Leah mentioned, Maryland studying New Bay Bridge, but obviously Maryland already has dualized 404.
Yeah.
There's also, no shock to this crew, a lot of internal development pressure. And what happens in Ellendale doesn't just stay in Ellendale, right?
No.
I mean, what happens in any of these parts affects the other parts. And that's why bringing everyone together is so important. So that's, thank you for that. So now I'm going to invite Andrea Trabelsi to come up. We're going to talk about kind of those current studies, planning studies, and some data.
Yeah, and I'll have support from a couple other folks who will be up here as well. But thank you. Yeah, I'm Andrea Trabelsi, a planner at Whitman Rexart Institute, and was involved with the Greenwood Bridge bill portion of it. So I'm familiar with on that. I will try not to be too repetitive because Leah and Andrew did a great job so far. I'm going to get a little bit more into the details. And as you heard, I'm going to bring you a little bit more to the recommendations table and packet in front of you. Talk a bit about that. You'll keep hearing sort of an echo of and here is how you can get involved. As our theme of the day and what we're trying to get through in this meeting today, as well as opportunities in future meetings. I'm also going to orient you to several of the priority recommendations from the phase 1, and Leah mentioned a few, and I'll highlight a few others. Good for you to be aware of those, because those are opportunities that are kind of current and actively looking for your involvement studies, and then highlight how ongoing tracking of data and metrics can help this effort. Mention a few points there, and just again finally remind where are the good opportunities, best opportunity to engage. So you've already kind of started looking at this, and you know what happened in the previous phase. The recommendations table as shown here is abbreviated, and it's compiled with both the recommendations out of the eastern planning area, I'll call it, and then the western, those two areas that Leah showed on the map that you see here. They highlight things like lead agency, who would be responsible for moving things forward generally, implementation type, I'm going to drill into that more, and related to implementation type is a little bit of time frame. You know, at the report itself was wrapped up last spring, what we were anticipating. Again, I think those types of things and priority are the types of things this group will reflect on and consider, and that might change a bit over time. So the implementation type, that's what you see in these colors. There are 5 of them, and we use this to help just organize how we're thinking. So again, they're intended to help this monitoring committee and us, frankly, kind of track like, okay, you know, the ones that are number 1, gray, are likely to happen under existing operations and so on. And I'll talk more about those on subsequent slides, but several priorities coming out of the overall phase 1 reports. SR 16 in Milton, accommodating traffic growth on US 9, policies for interconnectivity that would be at kind of the county level. Newton Road from the western area over there near Bridgeville, Redden Road, highlighted in green here, as well as Scott Store Road, SR 404. And we definitely encourage you. It looks like everyone is already kind of taking a closer look, so that's great. These will be useful packets for you, and they'll come up again. So I'm just going to highlight, we can revisit these as we get toward the end of the presentation if there are specific questions or comments. But type 1, conducting under existing operations. So those are sort of the nearer term things. Bullet points here just highlight kind of groupings of what in general you could organize them by. So like PED, interconnectivity, there were several of those types of recommendations. For example, the SR 16, SR 30 roundabout, incorporating those facilities, as well as traffic studies and associated improvements, whether it be related to curves, sightlines, signal enhancements, and then also interagency coordination. So that would be things like DelDOT in the county, I think is one of them, coordinating around larger events that would occur periodically. The second type is needing a second phase of study, and that's predominantly what our subsequent studies that are getting underway or already somewhat underway are. I've mentioned the first 2, also multimodal connectivity for several of them, follow up on crash and safety studies, and that kind of theme that tended to be, especially as associated with some of the freight types of and farm vehicle types of concerns in the western planning area, and then also some policy related recommendations in this category. There's only one of the third type currently, and that is the Redden Road improvement recommendation, which actually happens to be in the FY25, the current CTP. It's highlighted here in green, and so this tends to be the type of thing that we would categorize something maybe coming out of one of these more localized corridor studies that are getting underway. But as Leo was saying, CTP projects, you know, come out of these studies. They also we need to be sure there's enough information there, you know, purpose, need, and some level of concept to be able to do that programming. So that's where this type of comes. 4 is you know, core type for this group especially, and the recommendations that are categorized under 4 aren't exclusively the things that we want to monitor for, but these are the ideas that seem like, you know, these aren't quite as urgent, they're not rising to the level yet, but at any point, you know, there might be a change or something may start to point us to think, gee, this now is becoming important, we better get that focused on. There are several program sort of resources that different divisions at DelDOT are responsible for that I've listed here that would tend to give the type of year-to-year information. I'll be talking more about metrics shortly in a bit more detail. But these are some of them. So you may have heard of the hazard elimination, and that comes through track crashes and safety data. And actually, the earlier slide at the beginning that Austin pointed to, those are the types of things we want to be aware of, is where are their safety concerns and are those trends changing over time? And okay, now that we're seeing something happening more frequently, is it time to focus on that? Transportation operations management plan looks a bit more at circulation and traffic. So that's certainly a resource, and collects data periodically. Actually, the Sussex County TOM, as it's called, is currently underway and I think anticipated in the near future, its report. Corridor capacity preservation program, that program focuses on actually 3 of the corridors are in Sussex County and run through our study area here. So 1, I guess on the edge is 113 and US 13. And then just in general, and Ben will be sharing a bit more about this, the travel demand forecasting and modeling, those are resources and they provide information that can be helpful to us, as well as some of the things that just are, let's stay aware of what's going on, for example, in Maryland, and even in the places more close to home that you all may have information on. And finally, we've got an other category 5. It tends to be those things that would be more focused on leadership from county or municipality, or maybe is more of a fully policy-oriented action. So some examples in that category are things like municipal and county policies oriented toward like parking or multimodal safety, interconnectivity. Just, I think something worth noting is that there has been progress on one of the recommendations from this group, the interconnectivity of development. Sussex County ended up passing an ordinance late last year in December, 3061, I have to check my notes on that. And it, among other requirements, applicants must ensure that there will be safe and efficient vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and to and from adjacent development properties with interconnectivity where appropriate. So that's as reflected by the preliminary plat. So that's a step toward that goal that this is focused on, of interconnectivity. Okay, so I'm going to bring our attention to several of these. I guess they were the blue category, type 2, but underway plans and studies. So community transportation plan type, Leah mentioned, Milton, the active transportation plan effort is underway. Kind of in coordination with that is the SR 16 corridor study, also US 9, and then Newton Road, as I've mentioned. So you can see those placed on the map here. I guess one point is just to make that some of the tools that Ben will talk about do apply to these studies. And so there will be some additional input to those that you'll hear more about shortly. And these are efforts that we would encourage you to engage in. And you'll see a little bit more about that toward the end of the presentation as far as status and where those are each in their process. All right, so we are encouraging your involvement, obviously, in the studies themselves, and many of you have been involved so far. And again, thank you. Engaging in these meetings is important, helping build awareness, important. So those things you've already heard about. I guess I think most of this will be echoing what you already heard, but again, time frame is really going to vary by study. So unlike the CTP, which has its regular cycle, I'll be mentioning more about that in a moment, these studies kind of occur throughout the year and have their own specialized process. There's a lot going on in this area, isn't there? You can see here other studies and initiatives that are going on. So, orient yourself. The study area for coastal corridors outlined in the blue. And we've got corridor planning studies, many of which I've mentioned. Safety and sufficiency assessments, which Leah explained, are located some in the study area, some nearby. Community transportation plans spread out and around. And then transportation improvement districts, which we've got 2 that are operational and 2 under development. One of them, the Milton TID, is within the coastal corridors study area, as you can see, and that's under development. So that's definitely one tool that helps integrate land use and transportation planning. And integrating land use and transportation planning is definitely a theme here. As we talk about transportation, you can't unlink it really from land use. So just two other timely studies and initiatives. You've already heard about the timeliness of the capital transportation programs. And I alluded to Office of State Planning, and Dorothy will mention a bit more in a moment, but strategies for state policies and spending being updated this year as well. And that happens every 5 years, right? Yes. So that's something to be aware of. You'll hear more from you. As promised, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail because I think it's important to understand process, but not so much that will overwhelm you, and you can always find more details online. But just so that you know what to expect, the Capital Transportation Program is that 6-year program of DelDOT's anticipated capital and maintenance programs. It includes cost and phasing, so that's partly why having the concepts defined to a certain level of detail is important for getting projects considered and ultimately in the program. It happens every 2 years. It's on a 2-year cycle. Leah mentioned it's developed in cooperation with the MPOs, and here in Sussex County, especially Sussex County. FY 27 to 32 is the version that's under development or update starting this year. And just here on the diagram that kind of shows you where in the sequence of planning to project delivery process this happens. We start at the top with gathering the ideas from the local government, MPOs, and public, and then cycling through. The CTP gets drafted by DelDOT, goes onwards to have public meetings and receive feedback and such, eventually makes its way to the Council on Transportation, and then gets eventual approval for funding. Notably, that portion of the process where DelDOT receives the candidate study or candidate projects and then determines kind of ranks and prioritizes and eventually comes up with their list. These are the main set of criteria, or the set of criteria, and to what degree each aspect of a project is weighted. So safety is obviously very important. System operating effectiveness is important. That effectiveness is important, and that has to do with how well the system is working to process the traffic and so on. Multimodal mobility, flexibility, and access. That can include bike ped, other modes, freight, economic development, jobs and commerce, equity, environmental justice, environmental resiliency and stewardship, and then a state and local priority component. And just worth noting is that this generally has been in place for a while, as you can see, but notably for this next round, there's an enhanced process. And so what you see highlighted is what has been proposed and is set to be, I think, finalized pending the Council on Transportation's review and approval of it. So again, just to reiterate, what's your role? Where do you fit in here? I think we've hit this home pretty well, but this cycle, we're not in a position to have this group be meeting and discussing all of this as far as what projects. So in future years, I think this group will reassess and come together, and there'd probably be an opportunity in this forum in one of our meetings to discuss and ultimately come together with like a wish list or a recommendations list. But for this cycle, we certainly encourage you, again, to take your packet home, assess, connect with those you see here or others, and eventually the county is kind of where the ideas for candidate projects can be funneled. And in fact, I think the county actually works to have some sort of announcement or radio advertisement that I know has been done in the past to remind folks that it's coming. And certainly DelDOT also runs several engagement opportunities as this process moves along to get feedback and so forth. So listen for those. Don't hesitate to reach out with questions as needed. Okay, pivoting a bit now. I mentioned metrics when we were talking about this type 4 recommendations, those longer term monitoring. And this just comes from the text of the final report issued last year, highlighting that, yeah, this is part of it is tracking, kind of keeping the pulse of how things are changing, looking at those data sources, some of which I mentioned. And I'll reemphasize it goes for both transportation and land use development type metrics. So just some examples here. On the left, DelDOT's framework for excellence, that's kind of their planning goals, if you will. And it isn't necessary that this group will have the exact same things, but I think it's worthwhile just to acknowledge that those are the types of things that are aimed towards, especially at policy or planning level. And the types of measures are some of which you see here. Some of these were actually part of the processes that informed the coastal corridor study itself. So some of them are familiar and some of them may be things that collectively the group says, hey, like vehicle miles traveled or, you know, level of traffic stress, bicycle level of traffic stress and connectivity is something we'd like to look more at and see how it's being affected. So keep those in mind. And I think that will be a great discussion for this group over time. These may look familiar, they are in the studies themselves, but this just gives you a visual example of what some of those metrics can look like in terms of presenting data and how you can compare. For example, here are the volumes from forecasting tool that show you the today, kind of the present as it were, as of 2019, and then using the tool that projected on the bottom of traffic volumes, congestion, and then also that bicycle level of traffic stress and connectivity type look. So some things to consider and look forward to. Also, just wanted to mention in this area, transportation projects, there's always the transportation project portal. You see the link here, and actually this presentation is already on the Coastal Corridors DelDOT Interact page. And if you are not familiar with that, that is a great resource to be looking to for planning types of updates. And that's where we'll be posting things for this effort, as well as those corridor studies that I've mentioned. But this just highlights some of the projects in our study area here and some of the status. So if you'd like more details, I'd encourage you to go to the project portal on DelDOT's website. I'm going to wind down here and hand it over to Dorothy in a moment. But again, you can't unlink land use and transportation. So it's also important to periodically look, you know, at our land use metrics and reflect on goals and objectives there. Things like development applications, building permits, land use, land cover, those are types of data that allow us to kind of track how are things doing, where are they changing, where do we need to keep a closer eye out, et cetera. And there could be different ways of breaking out that data. So I think food for thought, and Dorothy now is going to come up and share a bit more about their annual report on state planning issues, some resources you might find, and also a little bit more about that strategies for state policy.
Andrea, before you step down, any questions for Andrea or for anyone? A lot of information. And again, I think as you'd expect for a kickoff meeting, I mean, we recognize that we're presenting a lot and we're not necessarily engaging you all in activities or what have you, but we felt we needed to kind of take this baseline, get this information out and kind of get to a starting point. So, but any questions or thoughts, comments? Okay. Dorothy?
Right here.
I'm gonna
No, that's okay. I'm gonna close out and get it.
He's already showing you how to get to the website.
So while we're doing that, I'm Dorothy Morris. I'm with the Office of State Planning Coordination. I am the Circuit Rider Planner for Sussex County. So my role in the Office of State Planning is to coordinate with all the county and all the towns in Sussex County for anything land use related. So remember my name. And there we go. So for the Office of State Planning, we were established under Delaware code. Again, Office of State Planning Coordination, we are within the Office of Management and Budget, which you'll find that makes a lot of sense because land use and financing is so closely related in the state of Delaware. Our guiding document is the Strategy for State Policies and Spending, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then we also, along with that, we do run the Preliminary Land Use Service, which is a program where developers who are developing certain things can come into our office. They put in an application, state agencies review these applications and give state agency comments on the development, so they know ahead of time what they're looking at, what regulations they're gonna have to follow, what permits they're gonna have to follow, as well as what might be wrong with that site, what might stop them from building or be an issue when they do that. We are also, we review local government comprehensive plans. All towns and the counties are required to have a certified plan in order to annex. So our office is in charge of making sure that they're certifiable. And then our tracking document annually, we do a annual report to the governor through the Cabinet Committee on State Planning Issues. And that's where you'll see the development trends that we'll look at in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to start off with the Strategy, State Policies and Spending. I want to tell you a little bit about what this document is not. It is not a land use plan, and it is not parcel based. So when you go onto our website, which I welcome you to do and check it out, you can drill into a specific parcel, but it is not parcel based. The way that we do the Strategy for State Policies and Spending is it's data. It's all data. So we have layers that promote growth. We have layers that promote preservation. We put those layers together, and then we get that ratio, and that's where we do our levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I just want to be clear that it is not a land use plan. The counties and the municipalities are the ones that control land use in the state of Delaware. But what it is just what it says. It's a strategies for state policies and spending. It is a financial plan for the state. Because as we all know, there is a lot more projects needed than there is money. So the state has to prioritize where money goes. And just to back up, it was created in 1999. It is updated every 5 years. It was last updated in 2020, so that means it's being updated again. Primary purpose is to summarize the state's land use goals, our strategies, and our policies. It is used by all state agencies. At the back of this document, there is quite a few pages that list every state agency and their priorities in each individual level, which I will talk about the levels in a minute. And it does direct state funding to support the most efficient use of state resources. There's the website at the bottom. I encourage you to go on and take a look. There will be plenty of time for public comment on the state strategies. So keep an eye out for that because it will be coming up soon. So the levels. If you've never heard of Strategy, State Policies and Spending, this is a copy of the document, the map that's done for the state. Levels 1 and 2 are basically in town. It's where growth is expected by local and county plans. And the state, it's where we want to focus our priorities on infrastructure, reinvestment, and management of existing infrastructure and redevelopment. Level 3 is sort of outside of towns. It's maybe what you would call your suburban areas. It's annexation areas for the towns where they plan to grow in the future. It could also mean that there's environmentally sensitive areas on that site. Maybe some places that we would want, if someone's going to develop that site, we'd want you to stay away from that and put density in a different part of that site. And then level 4 are predominantly rural areas where the state wants to focus on preservation, environmental preservation, ag land preservation, those types of things. Now I say that, understand that we do spend money in all 4 levels, but it's different the way we spend it. And again, the back of that document does lay out to you what our priorities for each level would be. And then last but not least, the development trends dashboard. Development trends are something we collect every year from our local jurisdictions. For those sitting in the room, you'll be getting that email in about a week, me begging you for information. We put it together and we go through and we track where development's going to go. We do staff the Cabinet Committee on State Planning Issues. They are responsible for doing an annual report to the governor to show the development trends in the state. This is a big part of that report. And I just want to point out, because a lot of people get confused. So there are, as you can see, there's 3 different levels. This is what is happening in level 4, that rural area I talked about. This is what is happening in levels 1, 2, and 3. But aside from that, the orange here at the bottom, this is plus projects or the preliminary land use service. This is where a developer has come into our office and said, I'm thinking about building here. Please tell me what I need to know about my site. They may or may not happen, but the fact that somebody is thinking about it means it's going to be on our radar. The second one is the green one. The green numbers here are development applications that have been approved by the local jurisdictions or the county. So it's more than just an idea. They've put it through, they've put their site plan through, the county or the towns have approved it. And then the top one, the blue numbers, those are residential and non-residential building permits. So those are things that the owner or the developer has come in and actually pulled a building permit for. So they are happening. We know that they're coming. This data right here does run from the counties and the towns from 2019 to December of 2023. As I said, we are collecting data now, and this will be updated in October for 2024. Now, this was a question that came up last night, so I am going to let you know the purple that you see here, the purple blobs that you see, they are plus data. They are things that have come through that we've reviewed through plus, and that does run through September of 2024. So it's a couple months behind, but if you go on our website, it's updated. And we also have the preliminary land use site, which you can drill in. If there's an area you want to see what's happening there, what might be happening there, you can drill in, you can click on one of those parcels, and it will bring up the application so you can see exactly what they're talking about doing there. And it will give our state comment letter so you can see what the comments we gave them about this. And I think that's it for me, but I do encourage everyone to go to our website, check all this out. I'm going to be here for the rest of the meeting. I have business cards with me, so I'd be more than happy to talk to you or give you a business card so we can talk later. Any questions?
Comments, thoughts?
Okay.
I think it's important, Dorothy, what you started with, which is that, I'm going to watch it, but this is not a land use.
It's not a land use plan.
Not a land use plan, but still an important piece of everything that's happening in these areas.
And that was brought up last night at our other meeting. The state, again, is not telling people where to build. We're just telling where our priorities are going to be for funding that infrastructure that supports that growth.
Hey, everybody. I'm Ben Gruthwitz with WRA. Happy to join you in the spotlight tonight. Our topic is, kind of, again, on this theme of integrating land use and transportation, but this is a little bit more on our tool side of things. And so just as a sort of review, we've been talking around this a bit tonight, but again, the reason why we're concerned, or the reason why we have different agencies involved with this sort of integration process of this land use side and the transportation side is that there's just different jurisdiction. And you all who are with the local governments or with the county know that that's the land use side comes from you. And then DelDOT is really responsible for the transportation side of things. So because these are interrelated forces, land use and transportation, we know we've got to work together. Otherwise, we're not going to create plans that really work out. And, Dorothy touched on some of the sort of more immediate how of things like the PLUS program, of how to do some tracking and development coordination between agencies. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the realm of longer term outlook that we use and tools we use, kind of building off of our traditional approach of using travel models ultimately and forecasting what roadway conditions are going to be like in the future, which will usually start with land use data as an input with a forecast for population and employment, go to our large state model or peninsula model, and then ultimately that information trickles down to these local corridor models. And that's sort of the traditional process. And I'm going to then highlight this sort of interesting experiment we're going to attempt with these upcoming corridor studies in the coastal corridors area, looking at variations of land use forecasts by both pace of growth and the pattern of growth within the county. So, you know, it's a sort of nerdy subject. I spent probably too much of my career on, but you know, I think it's a very useful tool. Essentially, you know, we don't need to get into the math of things tonight, but I do want to just give some lay of the land of just how travel models work. And again, it starts with that forecast of land use of what is expected in the future. That gets fed into the model. The forecast we typically use is from the Delaware Population Consortium, which is the official forecasting body. And then the model takes that data and interprets those, anything on the household or residential end as trip productions, and anything on the commercial or employment end as attractions. So pairings of different trips that could be happening. And then they just, it will sort of interpret that and then assign those trip ends to a network, similar to making the same choices we all make when we drive somewhere of this is a little bit shorter trip, or you know, I could avoid traffic this way, that kind of thing. And you get a view of the system and how it performs in the future through that process. And then you can take a segment or a series of segments from that bigger travel model and take a quarter study or quarter study of a more detailed model that's going to look at, you know, just how many lanes you've got, looking at turning movements and all sorts of different geometries. And it will look at that same forecast, but then what if you introduce some various improvements in this corridor? What kind of effect do they have? Aiming essentially at recommending things that are going to improve the system along that corridor. So that's a simple kind of way it works. But typically we're just looking at one land use outcome, right? And we all feel like the population consortium's forecasts are, you know, strong methodologies, decent stab at what 30 years from now will look like, but it's not a crystal ball, right? And so with these upcoming studies, we're going to attempt to say, what if we get more growth than anticipated? You know, is that recommended improvement going to actually be adequate? And is it sort of, you know, we don't want to invest a lot of money in something and have it fail. Conversely, if we get less growth, you know, was that really worth the investment? And then if we have growth in different locations than we were expecting within the county, does that change these outcomes on that corridor? So we look both at two of these dimensions of pace, sort of a high and low forecast, with the middle being sort of the population consortium adopted forecast, and then the pattern, which kind of gets back to what Dorothy was talking about, the different levels and whether the development in the future is really more concentrated or more sprawling. So this series of, you know, sort of thumbnail maps gives you a kind of view of what this could look like on the household end. We've got a pace dimension where each column is going to be the less is on the overall for the county is on the left. The middle is that adopted forecast, and then the more is on the right for those columns. But then we start with this compact growth, and what that looks like on the top. You can see that it concentrates into the level 1, 2, and 3 areas, and then the sprawling growth as you move down. And each of these dots on the map essentially represent 25 households and sort of where they allocate. So that's out to 2030. Cumulatively, this gets you to 2040 of the growth expected, and then 2050. And we think, based on current trends, we're kind of in this ballpark right now as far as, the medium growth pace, but with a more sprawling kind of, trend. And just another way to look at this, just by the numbers we're using in each of these level bins of how many households go into each scenario. So you can see as, you go from more compact to more sprawling, you're going to get a lot more level 4 growth, and kind of the converse direction for the other. And again, this is sort of where we're getting it's sort of the ballpark trends. And I will say too that this is seasonal peak that we're using so that we wind up with travel conditions that are kind of worst case scenario of any of these scenarios, right? So what we think we can do with this then is when we get to those corridor studies, we can sort of evaluate those improvements and then say, okay, which of these scenarios is this improvement going to really be effective on? Which of these, you can ask questions like, which like intersections or pinch points, bottlenecks, et cetera, are a problem universally, and that might direct some of the prioritization that like really highlights the things that we should start working on sooner. And then also just kind of think about, okay, there's another dimension to things, and there's policies that can be enacted on the land use side that might prevent some of these kind of congestion issues. So just to wrap up, the reason why we're seeking this kind of multi-scenario approach is that it really kind of allows us to explore this kind of range of applications on sort of future. It recognizes that we have more tools in the tool belt if we coordinate well across agencies to both have land use policy options and different improvements that can be made on the transportation side. And it really aligns with these kinds of processes we've been talking about tonight, where you might be wanting to address this dynamic in a corridor study coming up. You might want to address it in your comp plan. You might want to address it with the state strategies update, and really try to get involved with the different sides of the coin here and various processes. So, essentially, we're just hoping for more information that helps us set priority projects with our limited budgets now, and even look out to the future of what should we be budgeting for the future that we want. What's it gonna really take to get there? So that's the thought. I'm really, interested in any discussion and thoughts you had on, Scott.
That's wild. The last few slides you went through with just think about the Delaware Population Consortium. So they're kind of projecting from current census information into the last few slides there. You said that you're using peak traffic count data in that blue circle here. Do they take into account, is this just like full-time residents, the projection? I'm trying to puzzle this together because I get the traffic count, but like, how do they factor in seasonal and second homes? And
when we say seasonal, it's more on that the land use side. We're reflecting higher occupancy of these homes that are often vacant during the off-peak, right? So it's going to generate the seasonal traffic, but it's coming from the seasonal household occupancies.
Okay, so it kind of takes into account not just the transient, but the while they're here.
Yeah, and it reflects people, outside of the model area. It's got these external trips that are coming in, and all kind of based on observed data and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
These are households, not traffic counts, right?
This is households, yes. So this is, and again, this is the both year-round and vacation.
Because a house is a house is a house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. assuming like there's gonna be some vacancy, obviously, at any time, right? But there's gonna be a higher occupancy in that peak season in the summer.
Your thought, Scott, is the households generate the traffic.
Right, I'm just trying to think of how the data sets are being used. I mean, obviously Delta has all the traffic counts and this, it's just interesting to me.
Switch.
Yeah, I mean, so.
It's a house count.
Yeah, and that's informing, so when you build one of these models, you want essentially in the base year, right? The nearest year of observed data, they're gonna take all that census data and you're gonna run the model and you're gonna ensure that what gets, all the trips that are made, they're gonna be pretty close to all those traffic counts of observed data of that year. And that's the sort of calibration validation that you say, okay, this model is reflecting the real world. And then you take this forecast of the future land use and say, okay, what if we add this? What will that do? So the volumes of the future are obviously not observed traffic counts. They're just what the top model is telling you based on how the present behaves. This is sort of what the future would look like with those new households introduced. And employment, right?
Any other questions for Ben? What, I mean, you don't have to feel compelled to answer, but what are some of the hot button issue that, from an area, a project, something, and that might be of interest to you right now, like in your areas? Is there something, as we think about, I know you all haven't digested all this information, but, whether it's one of our recommendations that we already have or something that you've been thinking about that you'd like to sort of see move forward more quickly, a priority? Anyone has anything? Yes, Scott?
Well, we kind of referenced it at the other meeting, but since it applies to Route 9, the dualization westward on Route 9, just is that far enough, and should it be a higher priority with everything being planned there? I mean, that's a big one.
Anything else that is on the top of someone's mind? Well, we're going to kind of wrap up here, try to make sense a little bit of everything.
Yeah, we'll just bring it back.
About that, Route 9 is obviously a big focus of this effort. It was a big focus of the coastal corridors, the 113 to Route 1 part of the coastal corridor, and a big part of, I think, what we're maybe looking at here.
Yep.
So bringing Ben's presentation back into the context of what is currently going on, we have several studies that are moving forward. Many have already participated in some of the engagement activity associated with the SR16 corridor study, as well as that active transportation plan held back in December most recently. And then as we get results from forecasting and scenarios, we will continue that process and so forth. This highlights how you can connect to those DelDOT Interact pages. So again, that's a helpful tool. You can sign up and then you get some automatic notices. Nonetheless, you will also get information from us as we reach out to this committee just to inform you of things that we think you would want to be aware of. And then Newton Road, that effort got underway earlier in January with its first advisory committee meeting. We anticipate discussing preliminary recommendations, both with the advisory committee and having a public workshop later this winter. And US 9 corridors preservation study that will progress as that scenario forecasting results come in, and next step would be more of a kickoff, more formal kickoff. So. And then just lastly, kind of what to expect as far as this is going forward. And I guess I want to mention too, in those corridor studies that I, for example, am part of the project team on Newton Road. So we've mentioned you all to those groups as well, that, we're kind of keeping a pulse on some of those ongoing hey, what is gonna happen and some of the trends going to affect us in the long term. So it's a nice complement of looking at some of the high level area wide issues and then also having the more. So in the spring, the corridor studies, you'll be hearing more about, and things will progress. Dorothy's strategies for state policies and spending efforts, and then the capital transportation program. So things to be listening for and preparing for and having conversations about with your communities and such. And then in the late spring, I'm thinking May is when we'll be looking at this group convening again, having it in person. For those of you, we hope can make it in person, but again, we'll have an online option as needed. And just a reminder with the screenshot of the matrices, the recommendations table that you have, take that back with you, take a look at it, reach out if you have any questions and kind of put your thoughts together. If you think you want to see something move forward, let us know, let the county know as far as capital transportation program. And then just want to leave us with, I guess, a final question. I'll say it, Andrew. What topics would you like to know more about? So when we are thinking about planning for the upcoming meeting in May or whenever, what are some of the things that you have in your mind that are like, oh, I either like to know more about how that works, or, can we have a discussion on this, or a good question to end on and see if you have any thoughts. And if you know where to find us.
I think, it'd be great if someone had a couple thoughts, but if not, we want to make sure we utilize the time in between meetings. This isn't meant to just be a meeting to a meeting to a meeting. Things come up. Usually for me, it happens when I leave a meeting and I'm driving home and I go, why didn't I mention X or Y? Share it with us, email it, whatever you want. We want to hear from you. This process will work better the more, you all can be engaged with us throughout. So, we struggled to come up with a name for this committee. Monitoring committee can sound kind of like a little bit passive, but yet, it seemed to do the best job of, taking a look at everything that's been done, all these studies, and figuring out, observe everything and then try to act on it, try to figure out how to move things forward. I mean, that's the part that isn't really reflected in the name, but, this area for a long time, I think this was mentioned, you've heard us mention, we met with this 5 Points group last night that, there back in the 80s and 90s, every time DelDOT tried to kind of come to this area, they were kind of told, we're okay, go back up north. And there wasn't always a lot of elected official support and that kind of coalescing of coming together to say, hey, let's all try to figure this out and do something. Well, those times have changed. There is now that sense of both the community, the elected officials, the institutions kind of looking at it and saying, we need to come together and work on this together and figure out solutions. And this committee is a manifestation of that, if you will, bringing everyone together to try to focus on this coastal corridor area and, see what we can get done both for now and looking into the future. So, got to start somewhere, and this is our starting point. So if you're a member of the public that's online, you can send us through the Q&A a comment that you may have. We did get one from Randy. Where is it? Yeah, help me out.
He's on the committee, right? She's participating.
Well, she put something in the chat and I'm just not, there it is. Randy just commented, she found the land use and transportation metrics very helpful. I added very helpful. I don't know if you said just helpful. I added. Extremely. But any other, anyone else? I see Bill Weller and Brendan and Randy, but we also have one member of the public here, Rich. Rich, you want to make any kind of comment or anything?
Yeah, I do. I have two presenter questions and then a general question, but I want to be sensitive to people's time. Is that okay?
Try to be as brief as you can, but we save time for comment and you were patient, so we will be patient with you.
So the first question is to Dorothy, and it's relative to the land use metrics. So what percent of all the level 4 development in the state is taking place in Sussex County?
I do not have those numbers. We have looked at those numbers. I can get you those numbers. I don't have those numbers tonight, and I wouldn't want to misquote, so.
Okay.
I can definitely, but I can get you those numbers, and it is in our annual report.
Right. Okay. In reading your information, it's north of 70%. Is that, would that sound unreasonable?
No, that sounds about right.
Okay. And so of all the level 4 development in Sussex County, what percent is in level 4? Application.
There
I
again.
think I can answer that. It's somewhere between 35 and 40, I believe.
Well, okay. So it is likely with that number, 1 out of every 3 applications that have come in are for level 4.
I'm not, and I'm, again,
I don't think,
I
I mean, to be
would
fair,
approximate that's what it is. I'm not gonna.
Okay.
because,
quote me on it.
not every development, not every application that comes in is for the same amount of land, if you will.
Oh, absolutely.
So it could, but.
Right. And then the second question I have would be to Ben, and Ben, and it follows up on IG's question. And I know that your household scenarios were statewide.
Well, we have households statewide. The variation was only happening in Sussex County for
Okay.
this application.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you have a projection through 2050 based on those scenarios. What happens if something comes along, like 2 large developments on Route 9 that will take traffic from 19,000 vehicle trips a day to 39,000? How useful are those metrics that you show?
I think that the utility is that you're really going from a wide range. So you can even say that maybe 2050, we're closer to 2050, or sorry, the president is closer to our 2050 numbers than might be projected there. But I think that it's the whole idea is you get that range and you've got some sense of the what if it goes a different direction or unexpected route rather than that singular that it certainly doesn't have anything in the ballpark of what you're talking about, right? So.
And then the general question, and this is not for someone to answer, but I guess the 800-pound gorilla in the room, why hasn't infrastructure kept up with development? Or why has development outpaced infrastructure? And I think that's an important question because what we're doing is so good here in terms of future planning. But if we don't change things, we're just going to repeat what's happened over the last decades. So just a general comment. And
it's, I think that comment doesn't just apply here, it applies probably throughout the state and throughout the region. And there's always struggles with getting that investment ahead of time. It's a good point to end on, because I think that's a lot of what we're going to be focusing on here is trying to analyze the data, see the data, but also use common sense to say, what do we know based on all of our life experiences, and can we try to get some things put in place? Certainly what you talk about on Route 9 is a real life issue and something that I know the state's looking at and so forth. So appreciate your comments. Did we get any other comments that you saw on the Q&A? No? Okay. We got through things a little more quickly than we thought, which is always a good thing. I get incentivized for every minute before 6, so I get a potato chip. But Austin is your contact. You have his information. You shouldn't feel shy to email him, reach out to him. You will obviously work with all of us to resolve any questions you have. And feel free to share this information. We're going to check back with some of the people who had said they were going to be here who weren't here and make sure that for the next meeting we get as many of this committee members here. But to those that were here, we thank you. Yes, Leah, you had.
Mentioned this was recorded.
Yeah,
For all the members, they will be able to sit in, and you can rewatch it when you get home.
Over and over.
Yeah, so this will go on the website. So if there's something that you wanted to kind of go back to and listen to, feel free to do that. So any last questions or comments from committee members?
Thank you for all of the information.
We did, let me see, we purposely scheduled these meetings for the 4 to 6 time slot. We wanted to try to get not in the middle of your workday, but kind of right at the end. So it sort of tied into the workday because as I said, the majority of the people on here are kind of committee members by virtue of the role that they sort of serve in the community, the county and what have you. So hopefully that time worked well. So that was our thinking of the 4 to 6 time frame. So, all right. Thanks to everyone who joined us online, and thank you to everyone here. Stop the recording.